Israel was in a really dark place when the people were under the rule of the tyrant King Eglon. For 18 long years, the king persecuted, extorted, oppressed, and abused the people. In a time of unrest, wars, and oppression, Israel was in total chaos. God's people were living among people of foreign nations, intermarrying with them, and were worshipping their false gods. The Lord was angry at them for this. They were his chosen people, who he had brought out of captivity and into the promised land. And now they had turned their backs on him by choosing to intermarry with foreigners and serve idols. And because their sins were so great, the Lord allowed for calamity to fall on them. They were plundered of their goods, harassed by their enemies, and defeated in battles. The Lord was against them and let them live in suffering. But time and time again, hearing the people cry out, God would send them a deliverer to deliver them out of the hands of their enemies. And for a while they would have peace, but then they would scoff at God again and turn their backs on him and go right back into sin and would worship their false gods. It would seem to me that if you were being oppressed and the Lord brought you out of it, you would want to acknowledge God as the God of all. And you would want to stay in his presence, that of peace, love, and prosperity, rather than the unrest and hardships of following a false god. Anyways, once again they were following their false gods, so the Lord was so angry at them that he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, which his name in Hebrew literally means Cushan of double wickedness. After 8 grueling years of being under his reign, the children of Israel cried out to the Lord and said, "Please save us." So, the Lord, once again hearing their cries, loved his children enough to raise up a deliverer named Othniel for them. Othniel became a judge, and at the Lord's request, mobilized Israel and went out to war, and the Lord gave him victory over King Cushan-Rishathaim. Under Othniel's term, Israel had 40 years of peace, but then Othniel died, and Israel became a place of darkness again, having fallen back into sin and serving false gods. And once again they moved the Lord into being very angry. So this time the Lord strengthened King Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel. The king gathered people from the neighboring territories, the Ammonites and the Amalekites, to help him take possession of Israel. Eglon, consumed by ambition and a thirst for power, descended upon Israel like a ravenous storm, casting a long and oppressive shadow over the once peaceful land. Eglon's reign was marked by cruelty and injustice. He imposed excessive tributary demands on the Israelites, draining their resources and plunging them into poverty. Their hard-earned harvests were seized, their livestock taken, and their meagre savings plundered, leaving them destitute and desperate. Under Eglon's iron fist, the Israelites were stripped of their dignity and self-worth. They were forced to bow down to his every whim, their voices silenced, their pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. Fear gripped their hearts, and a sense of hopelessness permeated their lives. Eglon's oppression extended beyond economic exploitation and suppression of dissent. He exploited the Israelites' labor for his own personal gain, forcing them to toil tirelessly in the fields under the scorching sun without adequate rest or compensation. Their bodies grew weary, their spirits dimmed, and their dreams of a better future faded into the distance. Being exhausted and weary, the children of Israel again repented their sin and called on the Lord. And yet again, the Lord found a man to deliver them. This time he called on a Benjamite named Ehud, who was a left-handed man, which ironically, Benjamin means son of the right hand, and a good portion of the Benjamites were left-handed. For 350 years, Israel had no king. They were governed by judges instead, which were usually military leaders or civil leaders, or in some cases both. Each judge was chosen by God and anointed with his spirit. Ehud was the second judge that God raised up to lead his people. Ehud made himself a double-edged dagger, and being left-handed, he was able to hide it by fastening it to his right leg under his clothes. Most soldiers, being right-handed, kept their weapons on their left thigh to make it easy to draw out. As a result, no one suspected Ehud had a weapon. Now Ehud and a few of the Israelites took King Eglon a tribute of goods. These were items they had to pay the king as part of their oppression. After they gave their tribute, Ehud later returned and asked King Eglon if he could talk to him in private. He told the king he had a message from the Lord. King Eglon, being curious about it, agreed and told him to meet him in his private chambers. When Ehud arrived at the chambers, Eglon sent his servants out for privacy. Once they were alone, Ehud drew out his dagger and stabbed the king in his belly. Now Eglon was a very obese man, and when Ehud thrust the dagger into his belly, he was unable to retrieve it because the fat closed in all around the blade. Ehud then shut and locked all the doors and left through the porch. When the servants returned to tend to any of the king's needs, they discovered the doors to the chamber were locked, so they assumed the king was using the restroom or doing something private, so they let him be, until finally it seemed he had been in there for much too long of a time, and they took the keys and opened the doors, and they found the king dead on the floor. Having time to escape, Ehud made it back to Israel and told them of the death of the king, so he raised up an army and said, "Follow me, the Lord has delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." So the soldiers followed him down and seized the fords of the Jordan, leading to Moab, and did not let anyone cross over. They killed about 10,000 men of Moab, all stout men of valor, and not a single man escaped. Israelites, having defeated Moab that day, regained their peace and freedom that lasted for 80 years, until the death of Ehud, and then the next cycle of Israel's rebellion against God began. So there it is, the story of Ehud and the wicked King Eglon. Let me know what you think of this story in the comments below, and if there is any other Bible story you are interested in knowing about. Also, if you enjoyed this content, then please hit that like and subscribe button and enable that bell notification so you can always be sure to follow me for a lot more crime-filled stories from the Bible. See you in the next sinful story. Thanks for watching.